can tell her, you can tell her anything. She's a real good listener. You can tell her anything.
Hey guys, it's Teresa, Father Longlegs. You're listening to You Can Tell Me Anything. This is the podcast where comedians confess something they've never told anyone before. Except today we have a special twist. This is, I guess he is a comedian because he's very funny, and that's how I found him on Twitter. But he is actually a comic book writer, a graphic novel. I'll let him say what his title is. I feel like I'm butchering it. But we met on Twitter, very funny, and a confidant. And I was like, you gotta come on the pod. It's Ryan Estrada. What's up?
Hello. Yeah, I'm a cartoonist. I do actually do stand-up comedy here in
really?
South Korea.
That's so
yeah,
cool.
I'm not saying I'm good at it, but I do it.
Do you do it in English? Also, is this
Yeah.
camera? We're also, for the listeners, there's so many contraptions on my desk. There's like 2 microphones, an iPad, and my computer and a Zoom recorder. So I feel like one of those, like the guy in Jurassic Park with all the computers. You do stand-up, and do you do it in English?
Yeah, I do it in English. There's a bunch of open mics here of different kinds of things, and I kind of test material out before I make it into comics.
That's so cool.
There's lots of opportunities here to try stuff on stage, and like I said, and it doesn't necessarily mean I'm a professional comedian, but I do tell jokes on stage.
That's awesome. And you have a comic book that's coming out in May. If you guys want to know the exact date, I think there's been some delay because of the coronavirus, but it's called Band Book Club, and you wrote it with your wife, and it should be out soon, right? Around May, but look it up if you guys want the details on it.
Yeah, it's supposed to be May 6th. It's a graphic novel my wife and I co-wrote about her time fighting fascists in 1980s Korea.
That's so wild. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that we can take stories from like the 80s and it'll still feel so relevant right now. I mean, I don't know if that's a good thing that where fascism is back in style, but it does feel like it's super relevant to be telling those stories right now.
It's back in, baby.
Everybody's comes back around. About fascism. Oh no, even racism. So how long have you lived in South Korea?
I first came in 2002, but I've come and gone a lot since then. I moved to a new country every year for about a decade. But
wow.
My wife and I have been here about 7 years at this point, this trip.
That's so cool. I have so many questions for you because this is the first time we've actually talked. But before we get too into it, I do like to start with a good confession. Just to start on a positive note, is there something good you'd like to confess?
Yeah. So a long time ago, I used to do this YouTube series, and I'd called Expeditions, and I'd go off, people give me missions, and I'd go solve them around the world. And I did a lot of like good deed kind of videos back then, where I'd like do something nice for someone. And like years later, as I'd see other people doing videos, I started to feel like really weird about it. Like the whole thing where you like just approach someone without asking and do something nice for them, and like they, they can't really decline, or they look like jerks, and like
this is like the early days of YouTube.
Yeah, very early days of YouTube. But people are still doing it now. Like, that's not what I did, but like you walk up to a homeless person with a camera and give them some money, and like it's just weird. So I've always felt weird about doing that. So I mean, I've done this a few times. I remember one time that I was just like, you know what? Since I did all that, today I'm just going to do something really nice for some people and never tell anyone, not videotape it, just because I want to. So I was at a train station and I went to the fast food restaurant and I ordered I think it was like 30 combo meals.
Oh, wow.
And it was early in the morning, and there were like homeless people sleeping all over the subway. And so I didn't want to wake them, so I just went around, like I had 30 of them. I found as many people as I could and just set them next to them. So when they wake up, they'd wake up to like coffee and food and everything. And I got to the end of the subway line and I started walking back, and I noticed that the meals were already gone, and I'm happy, but I realized everybody's still sleeping.
Oh.
So I'm confused. And then I see this one homeless dude running down the hallway with 30 bags of fast food, going hee, really excited. So I never told anyone about it because that wasn't the point of it. And none of the people I did it for knew, but I know that I did it. So that's my good confession.
That's a great confession. Wait, so then one guy got all of them, but he's still hungry, so he was
happy. I made that guy happy.
Yeah. It's always like, it sounds so silly, but like, because sometimes when you want to give out stuff to homeless people, like because I've done it with groups and then also without, and it helps to go with the group because I think sometimes they have like a rhythm and like a like they know where to go and they have relationships with the people on the street. But one time when I was living in New York, very young, like right out of college, I remember my production company I was working at, they were just getting rid of a ton of stuff for the holidays. And like I was like the last one there, and I was just like, there's all these things like blankets and jackets. It's like, oh, I'll just give them away to homeless people. But it took me so long because I realized I just didn't know where to go. And so I was walking around trying to give it to people, and then there were people who maybe looked homeless, but I didn't want to assume. And there was a lot of that where I was like, wow, this was also before I did comedy. Now I feel like this could be a funny bit. I mean, more about myself and less about, the people, but just me trying to do a good thing and then realizing like, I should probably have researched this. It's not, you can't just go out and like hand out essentially what was junk. I mean, it was like, it was nice, but basically I thought, oh, I'll just give it to someone. Like, no, it's not that easy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so from then on, whenever I've tried to go, I'm like, okay, let me look up a group because I'm pretty incompetent at this, passing out things.
Yeah, it's a very fine line you got to walk when you're doing stuff like that, because you don't like, you don't want to like make it about yourself and like expect something from them and like expect a certain reaction.
Yeah.
If you want to do something for someone, you really just got to do it. And like I said, that's why I felt so weird about those videos. Like I watch videos now and be like, oh, that guy's a jerk, and then I'm like, my videos were so much worse than that.
Well, you didn't know. I mean, it's a learning experience. I think you kind of had your heart in the right place. But yeah, I think that you're right. What you said about like doing it not for yourself, because like it's hard to discern that, because I think doing a good deed is still a good deed, and I'm sure it has positive value. But I think someone on this pod has talked about it before. I can't remember who, but the idea of like giving $1, but then like not wanting to touch the person you're giving it to, that's sort of like the mentality of a lot of philanthropy in like the wealthy communities, where they're like, oh, I'm giving, but I'm better than you. So I think there's a difference between that and just being like, oh, I want to help and I have the time and resources right now.
Yeah, it's just like, and it's not like there's some global karma you need to like have the exact right intentions to do something. It's just make sure you're not creating some kind of pressure. Like you wouldn't go up to any other stranger with a camera before asking and put them in your YouTube video. So why are you doing it for a person that that can't say no because you're giving them something that they need?
Have you watched The Good Place? Not to make this a TV podcast, but they do have, of course, they address that very thing where people do good deeds for the wrong reasons.
Yep.
But yeah, you guys I'm sure it's a well-known show. They don't need my publicity. Well, you listen to this pod, so you know that I like to talk about therapy. But I know you're in South Korea, you travel a lot. So how do you sort of stay like up to date with mental health? Like, how do you, make sure that you're feeling good and all that? What's your relationship with therapy and that whole realm?
Yeah, I have like the weird thing about my brain chemistry is that I am just always excited about everything. I have like whatever the opposite of depression is, in just a way that like I can be in a horrible situation and just be like super into it. So like
not just neutral and calm, but like finding the positive. So you're literally like an optimist about situations.
Yeah, like I've been in situations where I've like been in horrible danger, being like near being eaten by lions, being thrown out of a train, being like all the situations, and I'm just excited about like, am I going to make a comic about it? Am I going to tell a story on a podcast? What am I, like I'm into it. So and it's something that's just always how my brain has worked. And so I don't know what caused it. I don't know why I'm like that. Mostly it's just, I think because I'm a storyteller, like that's just what I'm so obsessed with. That's what I think about. And so just the negative aspects of a situation just never really occur to me. And I'm just always super happy.
That's really interesting because, well, I mean, I do have follow-up questions, but the first thing I thought of was negative isn't, I mean, there are negative emotions that come with things, obviously, and then there's also just like not processing, but I think the whole range of emotions is valid. So what's interesting to me there is it's almost like, is it a conscious decision or at some point did you make a subconscious decision to be happy because you didn't want to feel the bad stuff, or but since you've known, you've always sort of just naturally reacted in a positive way.
I think I've always just reacted in a positive way, and I'm not saying that's a good thing. Like there are situations that where like I said, I was in mortal danger, and a little bit of fear and dread might have saved my life if I.
Wait, were you really chased by lions? Or was that an example?
I was lost in the Masai Mara, which is like where the Lion King took place, basically, but the other side of the border, and I didn't know that it was a protected wildlife reserve you weren't supposed to go into, and I just went wandering around, and I didn't see I saw the lions later, but when I was there, I found out later from zoologists that I had been like chilling out where lions had just killed some animals. So
wow. Well, so then they weren't hungry because they just killed, so that's good. Well, I want to learn a little bit more. I mean, because you typically, a lot of the people I have on, I've like talked to before and I know them. So I just like for me and also the listeners, you have such an interesting life and you travel. Obviously, you have you tell a lot of stories. You've written comic books. What kind of give me like a little bit of the summary of like what got you into comics? I mean, you like comedy because you do stand up. Is what drew you to that sort of art form?
I guess just since before I can make memories, I've wanted to be a cartoonist. I was pitching to newspapers when I was 5 years old.
Oh wow!
Straight up like putting together pitch packets.
Really? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Michigan.
Okay. What was your favorite cartoon growing up?
Back then, it was Garfield.
Okay, yeah, I love a Garfield. Yeah, definitely. I had the little books, and then they had the shiny covers. I remember those.
Oh yeah. I had a whole bookshelf. I had all of them and the different reprints, and I had a whole basically a shrine to Garfield when I was that young. And like the first comic I got published, I actually finally got published when I was 15. I didn't get the job when I was 6, but I kept bugging them. They hired me when I was 15, and the comic I did was about an orange cat who's too lazy to chase mice. So my influences were very visible. But yeah, I just kept doing that and loved it. And then eventually I just started traveling because I realized I could live wherever I wanted, and I just go to wherever seemed cool, have adventures, and then make comics about them.
That's so cool. Did you know I don't know if I've said this on the pod, but my first play I guess it's the first play I ever wrote was in 2nd grade about a cat who gets a job. It was called Cat Needs a Job. But there's a cat in it. I don't think he was orange, but something about cats, man.
Well, you're going to produce it now? You still have it around somewhere?
It probably exists somewhere. There's really not much to it. The cat goes around, looks for a job. It follows that childhood formula where it's like, there's a mission. He tries in these places. He fails and then gets it. But there's a witch, and then you have to kill the witch. And that was kind of it.
I think you should produce it without a single cut.
Should I do that?
Just exactly as written. Do it.
Maybe I'll do a dramatized version and have it read on the pod. That would be fun.
Nice.
That's so cool. I mean, that's really astounding. I mean, you must know that most people don't get their first comic published that young, and you always had this ambition and drive. So has your life always been sort of like you knew exactly what you wanted to do?
Basically. I mean, I didn't know that I wanted to travel until that started. Like the dream was always go and work in LA, working for Disney or something like that. And then I just started traveling because everyone got laid off in the animation industry when I graduated. So I just started traveling just to, have a job. And I'm like, wait, I like this so much better. And I can just make comics on my own and not have to work for a big company and, answer to other people. I can get stuff done on my own, get it done fast, and live wherever I want. And I was living the kind of life where I could just watch a YouTube video about sloths and be like, yep, moving to Panama, moving to Costa Rica. And yeah, so that's just what, that kind of changed at that point when I realized that. And so now I'm just a world traveling cartoonist.
That's the coolest life. I mean, you're right. There's nothing negative to be thought about that. It seems like you're achieving the dream. So that is very cool. So you always like to travel. I'm trying to get a sense of like your mindset and worldview. So I'm really I love traveling and like seeing the world, but sometimes when I travel, for me, it's like about escaping something. But you seem to find your home in all these places. But at the same time, there's like a expiration date, because the way you talk about it, you're like, I stay here for like 10 years and then I move. Is there like in your mind a way that you would settle down, or is your life sort of always on the go? Like you don't want to be in one place?
Well, I have kind of settled down here in Korea now. Like I said, that was about a decade that I did that, a new country every year. And now, since I've been married, my wife and I have been living in Busan, which I just really like it here because there's a really nice art community, lots of artists that I've collaborated with. And so I've kind of settled down here a bit. We don't know, eventually it'd be nice to go back home to the U.S. for a little bit. We don't really know everything the future holds, but I am pretty settled down now. I'm not just going to suddenly go to somewhere I saw in a YouTube video at this point. But,
gotcha. I think I misunderstood. You said 10 years. I think I thought you meant like you like move every 10 years or something. But now that makes a lot more sense that you did it every year for 10 years. Okay. Gotcha. That makes more sense. And you and her work together a lot, right? So did you guys meet through making comics, or was that a collaboration that came about later?
We met through just a group of friends here in Korea that did like art exhibitions. My wife wasn't really, didn't consider herself an artist, and just kind of got peer pressured constantly into making art for things. And so now that we're together, it's still me peer pressuring her into making things. And like the book we wrote together came about just because she had this story that I didn't even know about until I'd known her for over a decade, and she just casually mentioned it as though it was a thing I'd always known. And I'm like, wait, you were interrogated by the KCIA? What? Why?
Wow.
And then it just became a book. So we co-wrote it together.
That's so cool. Well, speaking of, there's no good transition here, but Ryan, is there anything you would like to tell me?
Yes. So I have a story for you.
Okay.
This first part isn't really the confession, but it's important to know because I had never been on a date or so much as like kissed anyone until I was 26 years old.
Oh wow. Okay. Because you were always traveling. You were like gone before they were like, I'll see you tomorrow. And you're like, well, I'm moving to Africa tomorrow.
Yeah, it was just like it. Yeah, as I was a kid, like it's just I was always obsessed with making comics and like getting perfect attendance, straight A's. Never thought about it, but then later, like as I became an adult and started traveling, it was just more about like I pictured like the movie love, the thing you see in movies. That's like it's a very different type of relationship than ever exists in real life. It's like that like will they won't they thing where it's like nobody knows what it is and they don't talk about their feelings until like that one moment when it all comes out in this big grand gesture and everything's perfect. And so like in my mind that's what love was, and that's what I was looking for.
What were your touchstones for the romance movies? I mean, like there's so many. I know what you mean in broad terms, but were there specific moments or stories that stood out to you?
Yeah, like for me, the big thing was like in like the big scenes in a movie where like I can't even remember any specific examples in movies, but like for example in the Friends finale, I know that was a big thing where like someone has been like people are afraid to talk about the relationship, and someone after some big blow up, someone's on a plane and getting ready to leave and never see them again, but then in one moment they're like I have to get off the plane. I'm getting off the plane because I'm in love, and they run off and everybody applauds. That was like the thing that I saw in my mind.
Okay, yes.
And I eventually found out that is bullshit. That's not a real thing. And there's a reason that always happens at the end of the movie. It's because what happens next is the guy gets suspected of terrorism and detained at the airport and actually shuts down a bunch of flights. And it's the reason that I know that is because what my actual confession is that I was the guy that got off the plane.
Wow. Okay.
So
you stopped a plane for love.
Yes, I got off a plane for love. So basically this happened in India.
Okay.
And
how old were you when this happened?
This is when I was 26.
Okay. So you still had never kissed a girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this was the first girl I ever kissed, and it was like someone that a coworker at I was teaching at a call center at that point, and it was just this like very like in the movies, we don't quite know what this is, and just kind of talking a lot and holding hands and going on trips together, and you know, I was just a nerd who had never kissed anyone, and you know, her parents wanted her to have an arranged marriage, so we really didn't know what the future of this was or what it was. And then this went on for a while until it was getting close to the end of my contract in India, and I'm getting ready to leave, and we still haven't really talked about what is this and where is it going. And then one day she just says, like, you know, I wish there was a place we could be together and no one would judge us, and you know, we could do whatever we wanted. And so I just said, you know, we could do that. You could come with me.
Wow, what a line. And you had lines.
Yeah, which is like, we've never even said we're in a relationship, but all of a sudden I'm saying, like, move across the country with me. But she said yes. She agreed to do this. And so we figured out that it was going to be kind of complicated. I would have to go first once my contract was up. She was going to have to apply for a visa. I was moving to Mexico. And I'd gotten this big house there to make art. And she was going to apply for the visa and all that, get all that taken care of, and then come out and join me. And so I went out first. And I thought it was just going to be like a few weeks, but it ended up being like months and months we were apart. And we were always, you know, chatting online and talking. And it was just kind of hard being apart. And then one day she just goes, you know, when I'm at work, I just picture finishing a call, turning around and seeing you there like you always were, and you're there holding a single rose. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's so sweet. That'd be just like the movies. Too bad I can't actually do that. And immediately I'm going to do that.
Wow.
Because that's what they would do in the movie, right?
So, yeah.
They would just get on a plane. So I spent thousands of dollars. I had to go get a visa to India first, and like it fly from Mexico to Chicago, stay a couple nights to get the visa, then fly like last minute flight to India.
And this was all surprise from her. Like, you didn't tell her you were coming. Okay.
She didn't know any. I like made up a story about how like they were working on my internet, so I wasn't going to be online for like the exact period of time my flight was. And then I like flew there, and then within I think 48 hours of her making that comment, she finished a call, she turned around, and there I was in India.
What?
Holding a rose. And she goes, oh, you're here. Why?
Oh my God. No,
and
so
like,
she didn't have the reaction that you expected.
She didn't. And I'm like, you told me to. She's like, I don't remember telling you to.
Gaslighting.
But I'm at work now. Like, this is supposed to be secret. Like, nobody knows about this. Can I meet you after work?
Wait, so there were people who saw you, and then they're like, what's he doing? And she's like, I don't know who this person is.
Well, I mean, they, like, you know, they all knew both of us, and they were like, probably incredibly suspicious. But I was just like, yeah, I'm here for a business thing I got to do. I just dropped by the
yeah, I work for Postmates. I have to deliver this rose someone ordered. Yeah.
And
did you really have a rose? Like, you really like had the whole shebang, the rose? Wow.
Indeed, okay. I did.
Wow. Very impressive.
Did. And then the agreement was she would come meet me at the hotel when she had time. And
ouch, savage. She wasn't even swept off her feet. She was just like, I gotta finish my shift, my riveting call center job.
And so I went back and waited for a week.
What? In the hotel? I mean, wait, how did you feel? How did you feel in that moment? I mean, were you still like buying it that she was like, oh, I'll see you later? I mean, was there a burst of a bubble? I mean, it does seem like there was some illusion that may have been starting to shatter.
I mean, I knew that like the whole thing was, it was a secret relationship. Like I said, it's the culture is very different there. Like we had to be very secretive when I was there. Like no one's allowed to know. It's all about like arranged marriages and like no one's allowed to date before, you know, especially no one their parents know about. And so I knew that she couldn't react in the way I wanted, but like, it just like, you know, I just did exactly what she said. I just acted out the fantasy, and then like, oh yeah, this is how the reaction would go. And so I'm like, okay, I'll meet her. And she actually did like swing by there on the way home and just be like, like outside the hotel, and just be like, okay, I gotta go home and sleep. So I'll message you when I have time.
What?
And then I just waited there, and like I'd try and call her, and I'd either like, she'd be like, why are you calling me now? You know, I work nights, I'm sleeping now. Or like, I'm with my family now, I can't talk. And so like, or sometimes she just wouldn't answer the phone.
Did you think
like,
she was giving you the runaround, or was all just like a cultural fear?
Yeah, that's what like I didn't know. I didn't know how to feel about it. I just like, at first I'm just like, okay, I get it, and then it drove me more and more crazy. Just be like, especially I had just flown in the country. I didn't have it's not like I had a cell phone or anything. I was just in this, and like I had gotten the first hotel I could, like nearby the call center, and like there's no, like I just had their phone there. They're like, there's no windows in this place. It's like a smelly, gross place.
What?
So like,
did you tell anybody about this, by the way, like friends or
Nope.
anybody try to stop you, or you just completely in your own head was like, I'm gonna do this?
Just did it. Nobody knew.
No chance to tell you maybe you should not go. Okay.
No, I mean my roommate. I had a roommate staying in one of the rooms in the house in Mexico that knew I was going, because he was going to be still staying there. But like, I mean, you know, I didn't really. I doubt I gave all of the information necessary. Just like, I'm going to go do a thing. I'm going to go see my girlfriend, even though we've never used the word girlfriend.
Wow. What's so insane? I mean, it's like so sweet, the fantasy of it, but what's like funny to me when I think about it is that you had to go through a lot of bureaucratic steps to make it happen, like the visa and all. So it wasn't just like I would do this, and then you went, it was like, I'm going to do this. Okay. And now here's 10 steps I have to do. And throughout that whole process, it's like, yep, it's still gonna keep this momentum and this energy, and
yeah, it's the 20-minute montage they cut out of every rom-com.
Yeah, waiting in line at the embassy.
Yeah. So after this happens, basically, like, I can't leave that hotel room.
Yeah.
Because all I know is she's gonna call me at some point.
Oh man.
And I've been waiting for days. I don't want to miss the call. So like, I don't even have, like, there's not even Wi-Fi. Like, I can't use the internet. I don't have a book to read. I'm just sitting in this hotel room, and like once a day, like I'll run across the street and get food and run back and like hope I didn't miss a call while I was doing it, and like just eat that food for the whole day. And I just like, I went from, you know, when I was in Mexico, I was talking to her constantly, and now I'm a few blocks from the call center and I haven't seen her in a week.
That's crazy. Wait, how was she able to talk to you so constantly there? What, just all on Wi-Fi, or?
Yeah, actually what I did was I figured out, I was able to talk to her at work because I figured out how to hack Citibank's firewall.
Okay, to get to her directly?
Yeah, because to do a quick digression, I was working, it was a Citibank call center, and all of the, you know, you can't use internet because everyone's social security number is there, and like you could just send it. But I figured out while I was working there that instead of blocking the whole internet, they just blocked everything that doesn't begin with the letter CITI because they need to visit their own websites. So I registered CITI.my own website.
What?
And I made a little chat thing. So hypothetically, we could have pulled off the world's largest.
You made your own chat, like you coded an app?
Well, I mean, I just like, I just put like an existing like plugin.
Wow.
On a blank page.
This is so much effort for. I mean, just amazing. I mean, I didn't know that this was possible. The links. I mean, you're really making me realize that the kinds of nice things people have done for me are nowhere near nice in comparison. I'm just like, wow, the standard has been raised. The standard has been raised.
There you go.
A website created, a bank hacked just to talk to.
There you go. I mean, it was a very easy hack because they have very terrible security.
I mean, yeah,
but
this
like,
doesn't make me feel better, but I'm not a Citibank person, so that's okay.
Yeah.
But,
like I was saying, we could have pulled off the world's largest financial scam at any point with that website, but we just flirted.
That's so wild.
But now,
Your
so we
life
did
is
that
so
constantly while I
Yeah.
was there in Mexico. But now I don't have Wi-Fi, and I can't. We're just not speaking to anyone at all. I'm not interacting with any human beings whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And so after this went on for about a week, that's when I realized, oh, hey, wait a minute. Maybe maybe this isn't a real thing. Maybe she doesn't really want me here. And so like that's when I tried to call her, and I called, and it rang and it rang and it rang, and I disconnected. I called again, and I did that for like 10 minutes straight. And I'm like, I guess that's my sign.
Wow.
I finally left the room. I went to an internet cafe, and I booked a ticket to go home.
Oh my God. Without even seeing her? She didn't give you like a don't talk to me. She was just like, just keep waiting.
Yeah. Yeah. But like 3 days had passed. I hadn't spoken to her at all. And I'm like, I guess I just got to, I'd saved up so much money for this trip. I spent like a quarter of it to fly here.
Oh my God.
I was spending so much every day to stay there. So I booked spent another quarter for like a last minute trip, flying out that day or somewhere that day to and from India is not cheap.
Wow.
So I booked it. And then when I went back to pack my stuff, the phone was ringing.
Oh my God. It's like a movie.
Yep. That's when the call finally came. And she's like, hey, I'm free now. You want to have some lunch?
What?
Yep.
That's wild.
And so I'm like, all right, sure. And because I still had like 10 hours for the flight or something.
Oh my God.
And so I went to lunch, and like she was acting like there was like nothing had happened. She's just chatting like friendly, like talking about the latest call center gossip and everything that's been going on during the week.
Was she acting like nothing had happened, like the whole relationship, or just that she hadn't totally ghosted you for a week, but she's like, we're just chummy again?
She was just acting like you were meeting a friend for.
Oh, okay, so not
lunch.
romantically, but like friendly. Okay.
Nothing romantic there. I mean, especially in public, that's what our relationship was.
Gotcha.
Like you couldn't do any public displays of affection.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be a big drama. But so we're just having a normal meal, and all of a sudden it's my turn to talk, and I just say, by the way, I booked my flight home.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly she was so upset, and like, why would you do that without talking to me? I'm like, I haven't been able to talk to you. I've been calling you all week. And basically like it came down to, she said, if you get on that plane, I'm not coming to Mexico.
What?
And you might never see me again. And I'm like, what? No, like, let's just forget this happened. Like, let's do the original plan. I'll go there. Your visa should be coming soon, right? And she didn't say anything. And I'm like, you applied for the visa, right? And she's like, no, I didn't apply for the visa. And I'm like, you didn't even apply for the visa. So that's when I realized, like, I got to go. And I'm like, okay, well, anyway, I got to go catch my flight.
What was your, in your mind, like your ideal situation of like showing up? Because it seemed like at this point you still thought down the road she's going to come visit you. So this trip was like, in the best case scenario, what would have happened? Like you would have just saw her for a few days and went back home to Mexico? Or what did you see the good version of this playing out as?
I mean, the ideal situation would be like I show up, it's just like a movie. I sweep her off her feet. We walk out of the call center like in
credits roll.
See, well, the thing is, like, I know there's so many romantic comedies that I'm referencing in my head, but I realize I only know the Simpsons parodies. So like when Homer carries Marge out of the thing like that, and then
there's a call center in Slumdog Millionaire, but that was really epic because it's like over many years, and then he goes on a game show. But like those are like some grand gesture stories where you're like, wow, the love that never dies years later.
Yeah, and the hope was that, the visa would be processed at any moment, and I'd be there, and she'd get it, and we could leave back there together.
Gotcha.
That's what the hope was, but that didn't work out. So anyway, that's when I went and I got on the plane.
Still holding the rose, just like wilted and.
The rose was long gone.
I imagine it like it's the Beauty and the Beast rose. It's like in a glass case, and you're like, your time is running out, and.
Yeah, I mean, I gave that to her, and that was probably like in a call center trash can, so no one asked her where the rose came from. Who knows? But as like I said, like that was the moment where I realized, oh, she's not actually into this. But then as I'm sitting on the airplane, like everyone's coming and sitting down, the doors are still open, and I'm like, is it though?
Oh no.
Because it's still like I spent so much money. Like, am I like at lunch she was so nice. Like, am I like if I leave, am I like just gonna never see her again? And like this, like, am I ruining everything? Should I have not booked this? Should I have found a way to talk to her first?
Wait, did she give you any reason for like why it was such a extreme ultimatum? Like she was like, if you get on I mean, to me it seems like she was for sure gaslighting, but just in that moment, did you wonder like, well, why the whole plan was I was never coming, so why if I leave now would you never talk to me again?
Yeah, I mean, she didn't have an explanation, but like in that moment is when I realized like, oh, she doesn't actually want to go to
she was just trying
Mexico.
to kind of control the situation.
Yeah, I think it, like, you know, she couldn't really, you know, both of us, basically what we'd done is like we had fantasies in our heads, but we didn't actually communicate to see, is this really a fantasy or something we're really going to do?
Yeah.
And we both just kept proceeding as though the fantasy was a real thing. And I realized that, but again, you're on a plane, the door's closing in like 60 seconds, and you're like, but the fantasy was really good though. Like, if I go and I never see her again, am I always going to regret it? But also, I've already spent half my life savings at this point. If I get off the plane, I can't get a refund, and I have to spend the rest of my life savings on another ticket to leave. And I also then can't afford like anywhere to stay. And so I'm sitting there thinking about this, and then the doors start closing. And without even like, my body just stood up.
Oh my God.
And I screamed, I'm getting off the plane. And everyone like turns and looks at me like freaked out. And they look really frightened. And I'm like, oh wait, in real life, if people scream that, it's, you know, it's something's
they're like,
wrong.
where did you put the bomb?
Yeah, I'm like, I forgot part of it. So I'm like, I'm getting off the plane because I'm in love. And they all hear me, but now like the person closing the door, I'm like way in the back. Like they're like, what? They don't hear what I'm saying. I'm like, I'm getting off the plane because I'm in love. And then all these people who are frightened, they just like slowly look at each other, and then they're like,
what?
I guess this is what they do in the movie. Not like in the movie, like they're just doing like sad golf clap. Like, I guess this is what we're supposed to do. I guess this is a real thing now. And I start running up to the door, and she's like, sir, you cannot get off this plane. And I'm like, yes, I can. And she's like, I'm like, you're going to have to leave without me. She's like, well, we can't do that, because if someone gets up and screams from getting off the plane, we have to remove everyone from the plane and bring on bomb sniffing dogs to make sure you didn't leave a bomb.
Right. There's no reason that you like, I can't get beyond this plane when it blows up there.
Yeah. They're like, we got to take out all the luggage. We got to like search every bag. And I'm like, but I'm in love though. And like security's already there, and they're like, get him off the plane. And they take me away. Then I guess after that, they removed everyone else from the plane.
Did they actually? Wow.
Yes, they did. And then they take me to this little special office. And this guy comes in, this officer, and he's just like, so what's going on? And I'm like, I got off the plane because I'm in love. He's like, I don't know what that means. I'm like, don't you watch movies? He's like, what movies? I'm like, didn't you see the finale to Friends? He's like, oh yeah, the last episode of Friends. I'm like, yeah, just like that. He's like, that's not a real thing. He's like, there's a procedure. I mean, there is no procedure for this. And he's like, another thing is that like you had a single entry visa. You've already stamped out. You can't re-enter the country.
Wow.
And like, there's nowhere, like you have to fly out to another country to get the visa.
Oh my God.
So this is the stupidest thing you could have done. And so he like, just sit in this room, and he has me sitting there for like an hour, and he goes out, and there's this little window. I can see like him and a bunch of other guards like arguing and talking. And I can see like the departures board outside, and everything's switching to like delayed.
Oh my God.
Like I've shut down this airport because like once one thing, like they're tearing apart one plane, like everything has to be checked and everything else is canceled. And so eventually, after about an hour, this guy comes back and he's like, we checked the plane. There's nothing wrong. Do you swear you're not doing anything weird? And I'm like, well, it's pretty weird, but
You're like, I came all
said
this
what
way
I'm
to
doing.
meet my non-girlfriend. It's pretty weird already, so.
Yep. And he's like, give me your passport. And he like, he's like, this is not a real thing. I don't know what the protocol for it. I'm just gonna scribble this out with pen. And right next to it, he wrote. Apparently, the word for it is self-offload.
Oh,
that's the term for getting off the plane. His handwriting was weird. At first, I thought it said "sexy officer," and I thought that was his signature. But he explains it's self-offload. He's like, I'm just gonna give you your passport, and we'll just pretend this didn't happen. When you fly out again, just make sure you ask for me, and I'll just kind of I'll just let you through. And I'm like, all right. And he goes, well, and I'm like, well, what? He's like, go to her.
Aww. Wow. He's like, so, yeah. I feel like that character would be played by like the comedic relief where they're like, you go to her. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Some comedian get a good cushy job out of that one. Nice part. And then and so I run through the airport. I run out. I get a taxi. I fly across the city. I run to the call center.
Oh my God.
She finishes her call. She turns around again. She goes, oh, you're here again. And then I got dumped.
No. Oh my God. How did she dump you? She just didn't follow you.
Yeah, it wasn't right. It wasn't right away. It was just kind of awkward conversation where she's like, you didn't really leave, did you? I'm like, yes, I did. And she's like, you made that up. You wanted me to feel sorry for you. And I showed her the thing. I'm like, it doesn't say sexy officer. It says self-offload. And she's like, I don't know what any of this is. And then she invited me to like stay at her house with her parents because like I'd spent so much on this very expensive, very terrible hotel room. And she's like, there was a whole other thing where like her parents very clearly knew what was going on, but no one would admit that they knew it.
Sure.
And then there was I think I was there for 3 days. The one big weird moment was one day she was sleeping after working at the call center, and her parents invited me into the kitchen, and they were like, "Oh, our friend just happened to come by, who is our numerologist," and it's like this man looks like the cliche of like the yogi, like he has the long beard with the stripe in it and orange pajamas. And he's like, I don't remember what the numbers were, but he's like, pick a number, 2, 7, or 12. And I'm like, 7. And then he like talked in Hindi for like 20 minutes, like very excited, like talking about like what, like, and I can hear the word like husband and match and like.
So they were thinking like, oh, this guy must be rich because he keeps getting on planes. So let's see, maybe she could marry him. Yeah. You're like, oh, let's get a numerologist in here.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, because I picked the right number. That's the only question he asked me. Like he's very excited. They like, and then they're pretending like that, like they're not. They think I can't understand them because they're speaking Hindi, not realizing that every other word is English. And then they're very excited. But then the next day, she just said like, "This is weird. I want a normal life.
Oh my God.
Go away."
But did she watch Friends? I mean, maybe you should have showed her Friends.
She didn't know about lobsters or anything, I guess. So.
That's insane because it sounds like her parents were kind of like leaning into, well, if this is what you want. And she was like, no. I thought you would say no.
Yeah. So I don't know all the reasons, but I get it. Like I said, we'd never even used the word girlfriend, like
sure, yeah,
or love or anything like that. So like it was very stupid of me to just like with no communication be like, this is what they do in the movies. Like this is all every aspect of this is life changing in ways that are probably irreparable. Like so I just kind of spent the rest of my money to get another last minute ticket.
Oh my God.
Flew back, went from having like enough runway for like several years in Mexico to like broke and and just went and lived in this house in Mexico for a while.
Wow.
And that's my confession. I shut down an airport.
Crazy. really crazy story. I feel like I've learned so much about you from that. And you say you're always positive, but I'm curious, like obviously it didn't feel good to be heartbroken, but like, were you like upset? Was there any coping period of like, like crying, or were you just like, well, I did that thing and that's moving on? Because the way you tell it is like, it's such a, like, what's the word? Like grandiose story that it's almost unbelievable, but it obviously happened to you. So like, how did it feel like in your mind going through this?
Yes. Especially that time alone in the hotel room was like probably the only time I can think of that I wasn't like excitedly thinking about how am I going to turn this into a story. Like, especially like it's a story that I've very rarely told. And it just like that there, I just felt like dead inside. Like I didn't feel like angry or sad. I just felt like I don't know what's going on. And I just feel like I said, just dead, not knowing what the next step is. And flying out, like I felt really bad, but like almost immediately on the flight, I'm like, this is a really wild story.
Yeah.
And, like just thinking about the fact that I shut down an airport, and when I flew out again, I did have to go talk to Sexy Officer again, and he's just like, just waved me through. He's like, we're not gonna talk about it. I get it.
Oh yeah.
No, he didn't. He's like, looks at me like, yep, all right, that's what I expected. Go home. And yeah, I mean, I was, it wasn't a fun flight home, but I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I think this is one of the few times in my life where I did really feel bad about something happening. But I mean, I just I learned from it, and I like I said, I'm married now, and my wife and I, like, we actually communicate and talk about things, and like we have fantasies, but we'll actually talk about like, oh, this is just a fantasy, or like, here's how that can apply to real life, and it's worked out all right. So I mean, I'm happy that it happened.
You don't show up at her work with roses randomly?
I mean, I can show up with roses. It's just, why don't we, I don't need to spend thousands of dollars to do it. So yeah, I mean, I do, I'm not saying I'm against romantic gestures. Just make sure that they're what the other person wants and isn't going to create this this huge impact on their life that they're expected to, have a certain reaction to because I'm expecting it, and like it could potentially turn their life upside down.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, because I think it totally, I mean, you were 26, but you were early in your dating career, right? Because it sounded like you're a late bloomer. So I think it's normal to early on have those sort of grandiose ideas of what relationships are. So it's not uncommon. It's just that you happen to also have a very interesting life where you're traveling a lot. So you're going to be heightened in your gesture. But I think you said something that was kind of, I wanted to touch on, like a key point with the idea of like communicating, because I think you can really like someone and have those crush feelings, but really at the end of the day, like it didn't sound like you guys really knew each other on a deep level, because she didn't. Also, I'll say this, I'm sure some of it was cultural, but it sounded like she really gaslit you, and I'm sure it's like harder culturally for her to talk about it, but like it didn't sound like she handled that super well. Like she led you on, it seems, and maybe for her own gain, because it was fun to flirt without realizing the consequences of an earnest man actually showing up. So it sounds like in both situations, maybe you guys like had a different idea of what the thing was. But I think, it's not that you can't make grand gestures, it's that you make grand gestures after you know someone and know what the actual situation is. Yeah.
Know what the reason for the grand gesture is, and like have an idea of what the reaction is going to be.
Yeah.
Just like you don't propose to someone unless you know what the answer is going to be. Don't fly to the other side of the world.
Yeah.
Without knowing that that's actually what the person wants.
I mean, I feel like in the same way I've been on the opposite side of that, like having grown up with similar movies and TV shows, and just thinking like being on the side where I expect this person's treating me so terribly, blah, blah, blah. But like once they realize that I'm the one, they'll show up in a grand gesture and it'll make it okay. And I've held on to that. And I've actually fallen for that before. And it turns out when someone's bad to you, like they're still going to be bad, grand gesture or not. So once the magic wears off. So I've gotten better at that now. But I do think like it's those kinds of images do make us think like, oh, well, that person's doing that thing. They showed up even though, they ignored me for a year, but now they're here. They moved here for me and they're saying they love me. So the movies say, and happily ever after. So, I mean, I think it's we want to believe it. I want to believe it. But yeah, it takes kind of like doing it the hard way to be like, well, nope, never mind.
Yeah, but most everything that they do in most everything the men do in those movies, like, would qualify for a restraining order in real life.
Oh, 100%. And also in most of those movies, because of story structure, which I'm sure you've thought about as well, most of them make such a grave mistake that in real life is like, you crossed a boundary and for that, you're out. Like, that's what it should be. But in movies, we're so invested in the relationship that we're like, yes, they cheated, but that was before they realized the truth. So now it's okay. But in real life, it's like, no, I think once you cross a boundary, you should just be like, all right, I'll take my lessons into the next relationship. You shouldn't really go back to someone who's like violated a boundary. But movies don't work like that. Movies love to like, really destroy it to build it back up.
Yep. We all gotta learn to separate fiction from reality.
But you kind of still live a very like cool like storybook life. So I mean, obviously you've changed your view on love in some ways, but it seems like you still have a very like imaginative worldview. I mean, how did that like did you do a 180 or did you sort of like temper it but still kind of do gestures or like have like kind of sweeping like ideas for how things should go in life?
I mean, the ideas I have in life are just to like live it without planning and like let things happen. And I do still live like I'm in a story. Like I when I'm in a situation, sometimes I feel like I'm writing fiction because I'm like, what I'm thinking about, like what makes the best story. Not that I'm doing negative things because it makes a better story, but like once I get myself into trouble, like I'm thinking about it, not consciously, but like thinking about it as a plot that I'm a
you're
character
thinking
in.
You're the character who needs an arc, so you're not going to avoid conflict. You're going to go headfirst into it. Someone said, I think it's a famous writer, I can't remember who, but they said the best stories happen to the people who can tell them. So I think that makes a lot of sense because things happen to you, you also seek them out, but you are a good storyteller. So they're like, I think those two are not coincidental.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of situations that I've gone in, very dangerous situations where it wasn't that I went in, purposely did something dangerous, but where I did something without researching whatsoever and just said, let's see what happens. Something's going to happen. Like that's how I ended up in that lion situation, was just because my sister invited me to Kenya, and I was just like, no spoilers. Don't tell me what's going to happen. Just tell me what airport to fly on and what bus to get on. And that's why I was lost in the Masai Mara. And I've done that a lot of the places that I travel. We got to kind of trying to find a compromise between me and my wife now, because she likes adventure, but not necessarily the type of adventure that I get into. So we need to find that compromise. I have gotten her like stuck in a coca war at one point.
What?
And gotten into some trouble.
Oh
yeah, there was
a
situation in Peru where we were taking a trip to the Amazon River, and while we were on our way, there was a huge war between the coca dealers and the government, and like there were guns and tanks, and
what?
This all happened while we were sleeping in the hotel halfway, and then the next morning we had to like walk through the aftermath of it, and it was a whole weird thing. Man,
that sounds dangerous. I mean, I can't even, like, your life is just so much more interesting than mine that it really does sound like I know these are real things that happen to you, but because it's like I've never been in that situation, it does just sound like a story. But stories are these stories that we hear and watch on TV are based in reality. So you've just done a sampler of a lot of them, a lot more than most people. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I think that was such a wild story. I'm going to be thinking about this for a while because I feel like I shared similar views as you did when you were younger, but I didn't have the resources to do things like that. Like I have shown up at someone's house in the middle of the night. I've done stuff like that, which is still pretty crazy, but I've never stopped a plane.
Yet.
I did consider one time, like in a similar fantasy relationship, where it was like long distance, and this guy would just kind of like play into the fantasy and say like, he invited me to a wedding of his sister's like a week before, but really talk so like believably, like made it feel like it was not. And I kept being like, yeah, it's fun to play, but like, come on, like let's ease up. And he was like, no, I'm serious. And I did think about what if I just bought a ticket and showed up, but then I was like, that's insane. But I could like 50-50 could have done that. But yeah, it is wild because we want to write the happy ending, and in order to get there, you're like, well, I have to like take that leap because that's what they do in the movies. And then if I didn't take the leap, then it's a no for sure. But yeah,
I'm all for leaps. Just just think about them first a little bit and think about how they affect the lives of other people.
Yeah. Well, that's well said. Yeah, I guess a part of me still likes to believe in it, but knows that it's more fun to just write it instead of actually trying to throw myself in front of lions. Well, I have a quick game before we finish. Do you want to play?
Let's do it.
Okay, cool. This is sort of inspired by the graphic novel that you and your wife wrote because that's about banned books. Once again, it's called the Banned Book Club, and you guys can find it online when it comes out in May. So this is called These Books Were Banned by Schools. Guess what they were based on reviews from these fools. You can kind of guess what this game is about. So in America, we also have a whole long list of banned books, and these books tend to be the ones that we read. It's pretty weird because almost every book we read in high school was told to us it was banned. It's almost like just like people saying like world's best coffee. I'm like, is it though? Like, why are we reading only banned books? Obviously, I know that there is history there, but these are all books that you recognize from high school reading lists. Maybe there's a few children's books in here, but the game is simple. I'm going to read a few reviews. I'll start by reading one, and then if you need another clue, they get more informative as they go. And just have to guess what the banned book was. How's your knowledge of banned books? I'm guessing pretty good.
We'll find out. Okay. I don't know. It's been a while.
All right. Here's the first one. These are all pretty... I think you'll know these. Okay. This first one is a review by Sadia says, DNF, which is did not finish with about 4 or 5 chapters left. Kept hoping something would redeem the book, but alas, mindlessly watching YouTube vids would have been a far better use of my time. I'm going to read another one because that's very vague. Okay. Here's the second one by Atenwa Emmanuel. Same book. My world, what an incredibly boring book this is. I ran out of expletives reading this book. A solid 0.5 rating from me. There are a generation of people who enjoyed this book. Shudders. I read this book for nearly 2 years. I could have had children and still be reading it, but absolutely need to put myself out of this torture. God, I will dance in fire over and over again before attempting to read this book again.
Okay, well, I'm going to guess the standard banned book with a lot of expletives is typically Catcher in the Rye.
Ooh, close, but not quite. Okay, here's the final review. See if you can get it from this. Got this book for my 12-year-old son to read. Felt uneasy with all the un-PC language, so we stopped reading. No wonder his school took it off their list of books to read. Maybe we'll pick it back up when he's older. You're on the right track. It's... the
Huckleberry Finn?
Yes, correct. Huckleberry Finn,
right.
Or Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Yeah, I remember reading that and having no context for all the bad words used, so I didn't think anything of it. And now I think it would make me as a parent uncomfortable. Well, I'm not a parent, but if I were, because now I have all this context. So it's tricky because I'm glad that I learned it. It's good education, but I can see why adults have their own hang-ups because adults think about too many things. Anyways.
Yeah, well, there are multiple different re-releases of that book where they've replaced the offending word with other words, including one where they replaced it with robot. So
yeah, I did. Yeah, I saw that when I was looking up reviews. Yeah. Well, we won't get into that conversation. I feel like that's a long conversation. Okay. Here's another one. Okay, here's the first review. These books terrify me. They are badly written and they have plots that don't make sense. Read Artemis Fowl instead. Please! Exclamation point.
Harry Potter?
Yes. Good job.
Right.
You got that one. I do want to read one more of their reviews because I think these are funny. It says, didn't like the first one at all. Found it utter garbage. People told me I should read the last one, but it was better written, more mature. Tried it. Nope. Still garbage. Shame. People really going after successful books. What's the point? You think someone's really going to read your review and not buy Harry Potter?
Witchcraft.
Okay. Okay, here's one. Let's see if this one's a little harder, but it's a children's book. Ordered because of all the high reviews, but found the story very morbid and scary for my young grandchildren. What a horrible story for little children. Do not recommend.
Where the Wild Things Are?
Good guess, but not quite. Here's a second review for the same book. Perfect for giving your small child nightmares and anxiety about being trapped, immobile for all eternity.
Trapped and Immobile. That makes me think of Sleeping Beauty, but that's not a banned book.
Okay, here's your final review. Let's see if you can get it from this. I bought this book sight unseen because it was on my son's reading list for kindergarten. I about cried the first time I read it. It is very sad. It's about a boy. Okay, this will give it away, but I'm going to read it anyways. It's about a boy who gets a magic pebble and he can get whatever he wishes, and he accidentally turns into a rock. And his parents can't find him and mourn his loss. The circumstances happen that he turns back into himself like a year later. Thought it was very weird, and we will likely donate this book to the local library. Did not like it at all. Do you remember this book?
I guess I didn't read this book. No.
It's called Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. I remember this book, and I don't remember it being this scary. Again, adults projecting your baggage and trauma onto kids. I don't think that this was scary for kids. I think it's just a whimsical story about a magic pebble. But as an adult, you're like, oh, when my parents ignore me and abandon me, it's sad. Which it is, but I don't think that's what the book's about. Well, the final one you already guessed is Catcher in the Rye, so I'm not going to do that one, but we'll just give that point to you since you already got that. So you win the game, Ryan, and for winning, you can tell the listeners where to find you.
Well, you can find everything on ryanestrada.com. A lot of comics you can read free there. All my socials are there, but you can also follow me at Ryan Estrada on Twitter, and all the links are easy to access at ryanestrada.com.
Yeah, go check out his comic books. Aki Alliance is available. It's online, right? You can read the whole thing or go buy it. I really enjoyed it because it reminded me of how I was doing too many activities in high school. So she's a fun heroine. And yeah, that's it. You can follow this podcast at Tell Me Anything Pod and follow me at Larissa T on Twitter and Instagram. Thank you.